You know, usually I'm a lot more consistent. Like, I try to have at least one photo up every month. But then, like, after October this last year, I went like 5 months without shooting any pictures. It was the strangest thing. Like, I just had no desire to pick up my camera at all. I never want to touch my camera ever again. That was until I got this figure in the mail. This is the Mafex 108 Comic Paint Spider-Man, specifically the reissue. And for whatever reason, this figure saved me. I honestly do kind of prefer the 075 version, but something about this reissue, you know, just getting it in hand, I really wanted to take pictures of it. Like, the itch had completely returned.
So let's get started. I began by setting up some buildings here. I got this wide shot angled up like this, very similar to a shot I did last summer. And I decided I wanted this to be at nighttime. That way the lighting I had in mind would really pop. I'm thinking an orange light coming through the window in the back, lighting Spidey from behind, but also reflecting onto this metal tower. I think that'll create a really good look, especially on the blue nighttime sky. It sets a nice mood, I think. Also, 1, 2, and 3 LEDs around the rest of the setup here. I made my white balance very blue, that way it would contrast with the orange. Now, at some point in setting all of this up, I added this pipe, and I got this idea, like, what if I just had a bit of water leaking out of the pipe? That's the type of detail that can really make this shot hit, especially with that orange light in the background to accentuate it. I think most of my best shots come down to this, where you have like one piece of the shot, like the orange light for example, and it just serves to make everything better. It looks cool reflecting on the diorama, it looks cool on the back of the figure, and it makes the water coming out of the pipe stand out a lot better. I'm not just throwing an orange light in here because it looks cool, it's a detail that works to amplify the best parts of the shot. Everything works in harmony, so to get the shot with the water leaking down, I first did this take without the water, and here are the camera settings I shot this at. I'm noting that here because I then sped up my shutter speed and I raised my ISO and got a bunch of shots with the water coming down. Because of the fast shutter speed, it can capture the water droplets like mid-air. Then I went into Photoshop and I combined these takes together, erasing just enough so you get that effect I wanted where it's just like a couple drops of water coming out of the pipe. You know, maybe like he just landed on that rooftop and it kind of shook the pipe so some water starts coming out. I'm not going for like a whole sprinkler look, just a couple drops, like it's a leaky pipe, you know. Then I went into Lightroom and I color graded this a bit and came up with this final photo. And I am very happy with this. You know, I wanted to take a figure photo and I think this is a pretty good shot to come back with. You know, on the surface level, it seems like there's a bunch of different techniques here, like the water, the lighting, the reflections, all this shit, but like it really is just one thing. It's just that orange light and stuff I thought would be cool to build on top of it. Like that's the foundation and everything comes second. It looks really complicated, but it all roots back to that one thing. All of that also distracts from the fact that I am really rusty. Like if you look at the background here, it's kind of a mess. Like look at that skyline, it just stops because I didn't raise the piece of paper high enough, and also you can see the stairs of the tower here, which doesn't really make sense. It implies the floor is like right below there, but this is supposed to be high up on the building tops. It's a real mess. But like, you know, the thing is, you can kind of just do whatever you want, if I'm being honest. Like as long as you have some very cool ideas to lead with in your photo, no one will notice these little details. Except for you. And me personally, these things bother me. I want to get better. I want to get back to where I was in October, and I want to go even further than that. That's the goal currently, so I got a lot of dust to shake off the rest of this video. So in the previous video, I started to experiment with paper cutouts in my photography. It's something I want to get a lot better at. Very common technique you see in ACBA and other toy photography. You know, you cut out a printed piece of paper to use as a text bubble or an effect or even a whole character in your figure photo.
You know, like the reason why this is so exciting is because in concept, like if I was to do a shot but I needed a prop or a character or an element that I don't have, I could just make it out of paper and cut it out. So really the goal here is to learn this so that way I can do any shot that I want.
During my time I spent away from taking photos, I watched through the anime Madoka Magica, and I think the best way to capture a lot of the visuals from that show in my photos will be to use cutouts. So this will be the first shot of many in this video, just centered around practicing cutouts and how to use them in my photos. To start, I'm gonna keep it simple. I want to remake this scene of her with the rainbow and the heart effects. Very fun. I got Madoka in this good like henshin type of pose, similar to the original image from the show. Then I remade the items I was gonna cut out in Photoshop, which I got printed at Staples on super heavyweight paper, 8.5 by 11. I got the hearts, you know, I got a couple of these, and then I got the rainbow circle right here. Cutting these out was pretty annoying at first. I'm just not used to doing it, but I got better as I went. I did run into one issue when it came to cutting out the center of the circle here though. I ended up just jamming my scissors through the middle and cutting around it, and it came out pretty nice. It's not perfect, but you know, we're getting somewhere. The hearts on the other hand were actually super easy. I made a bunch of them. To set this up, I began with Madoka on a metal stand here, and then I attached the rainbow around her. That way the stand is holding her up and she's holding up the rainbow. And then from there, it was a matter of attaching some of these hearts onto the ring itself and other ones onto stands around the scene here. I tried to couple them together in sets of 2 where I could. The goal here was to create a lot of depth and variety with different colored hearts at different ranges, so some are closer to the camera, some are further away. It makes the image kind of look like it's jumping out at you. Next, I pulled up this background on my TV to use. It's this big blue sky from a fan art. I thought it worked really well here. I wanted this shot to look really bright, so no shadows at all. It's lit with these 4 lights on the table and a 5th one I held with my hand while I shot the photo. Here's what I came up with. I went for a very soft focus at f4, and then over in Lightroom I lowered the contrast and saturation a bit. Wanted the shot to be super sugary and cute looking, but not saturated. Think like pastel pinks and blues, kind of like the candy Smarties actually. Like that's kind of what I was going for. Like if that candy was a figure photo, this is what it would be. You know, yeah, that actually is exactly what I was thinking of when I was doing this. Like it didn't click until right now, but if the lady at work hadn't given me a pack of Smarties that day, I probably would not have shot this. Also, I put a mask here with just some dots to raise exposure. You know, it creates a subtle little particle effect around Madoka here. I think this came out pretty nice. The cutouts are pretty cute, and I like the colors here a lot. However, I do think this shot would be greatly improved if I just used this smiling face instead. I think that would absolutely sell the look way better. You know, getting back into shooting photos, it's like I'm noticing little details like that are just not coming to mind as quickly as they used to. I for sure have some more practice to do, but this was a good start to experimenting with cutouts.
Okay, so now that we've got kind of the basics down as far as how to cut stuff out and use it in a figure photo, let's try something a bit more complicated.
The plan is to do this specific shot right here, okay? I want to do Homura, the flowers, and the ground all out of paper. I began by masking out Homura herself so I could get an idea of what I was going to cut out. Also did the flowers, and I duplicated it a bunch and also masked the ground just to get a feel, like a digital concept of sorts for exactly what I was going to set up on my desk in hand later. I find that if I can set something up on my computer first, it helps me visualize it better in my head when I actually take the photo. I got everything printed out, same as the previous shot, heavyweight paper, 8.5 by 11. Heavyweight paper because you want it to have some stiffness, some durability to it, so it's a bit better than just cardstock, or obviously better than normal printer paper for sure. And I already know, specifically that Homura cutout is going to be a pain in the ass because it has to be precise. It's a different kind of thing where it's like an actual character that's going to be in focus and interacting with a plastic figure, so if I fuck it up, you're gonna be able to tell exactly why it looks wrong. I spent a good bit of time just working on cutting it out nicely, and eventually I got here where all I had left to do was those braids, which were so annoying. But, you know, I did get through it. The way I got through it is by leaving these bits around the edges, which I can fill in later with a pen. You know, even aside from trying to get it precise, I was also worried about the stability of the paper, because if I cut too deep, it might just rip apart, which you can already see is kind of happening. But yeah, the method is I just come in here with a black pen and I outline it. It gets rid of a lot of the flaws and it makes it ready to go for the shot. For a much easier cutout, the ground is going to be this design that I just cut into a rectangle shape. I'm gonna put this whole setup in my light box. If you ever need a cheat code for a photo, just put the setup in a light box. It'll make anything look good. And okay, so I set Homura up here on a metal stand, and then I put Madoka next to her on a riser connecting hands, and Ooh, that really works. The cutout is the right size, and they look great together. Now for the flowers or tomato slice looking things, they're spider lilies. I know what they are.
You know, I've spent about the last, like, I'd say 2 hours, maybe even 3. I think it is 3 hours at this point. Just cutting out cardstock. And, you know, we're making progress. Like I showed, I got the big cutout done, the difficult one. Now I just have to cut out, like, I think I'm gonna do these 2 more of these, like, tomato slices. And then I'm gonna try to put it all together. I might need more, so I might have to cut more after that, but I think I can get away with just another 2 of these.
I set my camera up framing what I already had from earlier, and then I put the cutout for the ground from earlier in front using risers and masking tape and parts of a broken 1/12 scale bed frame. You know, we really use whatever we have on deck here. And look at that, that covers the risers and stands that the figures are on, and it looks good, like a good side profile kind of 2D scene right here. Then more masking tape, and I started sticking our tomato slices here on the fabric. I learned a lot about layering from our previous shot. You know, I want them at different distances. It creates depth, and the repetition of the same shape over and over again looks really satisfying. So I have these ones hanging down on stands from my lamp, and the lamp isn't on, it's just being used as an arm to hang these down. I do actually have this one on a Figma stand in the back as well. For lighting, I have this lamp aimed at our characters, and I also have this halo bar at the top of the light box, which is just shining down on everything, and that's the main thing lighting our flowers here. And lastly, one LED in front just so I can light the ground, because I don't want that to look dark. And from the right angle, the right camera settings, that's it. That's the shot. All of it lines up together. Here is how everything came out right off the camera. I made sure to line it up with the original frame to an extent. Also, quick mistake, I didn't bring the ground all the way over to the edge, so I'll fix that in post in a second. You'll see. I screwed around for a good while editing this in Lightroom until I came to a version I was happy with. Also, I shot this with way too blue of a white balance, so I also masked Homura to make her this like green color. It's a bit more accurate, and it looks nicer against the red now that I think about it as well. Then I took this into Photoshop to clean it up a bit with Content Aware. Then one more edit to fill in that gap on the right side. As God took Adam's rib to make Eve, I took a part of the left side and just pasted it over and mirrored it to fill in that gap, and I blended it together. And there we go. It was for sure an ambitious photo, but overall I do love this final outcome. It's a good step forward. I didn't think of it until after, but perhaps I could have just bought fake flowers, like fake spider lilies to use here for the background. That would have been a lot more accurate. I think it might even look better, especially since my cutout is missing those parts sticking off the flowers. But also, the goal here wasn't really accuracy, it was to practice with cutouts, and this was really good practice. And also, I think for shots from Madoka specifically, this type of like scrapbooking look where it's a bunch of stuff glued and taped together, I think it's actually pretty fitting to the visuals from the show. And man, that red color on the flowers is super sharp. That just looks great. One thing, however, that I would change is I don't really like how the colors on the ground are here. It's a bit too blue. It should have been like a light tan or like a khaki kind of color. So yeah, this shot is not perfect, but I think it looks really nice, and I did learn a whole lot while making it, especially as far as having a paper character interacting with a plastic figure. You know, that was one thing I was really worried if I could do that correctly or not, but I think it turned out great. And yeah, overall it was a good success, just in terms of looking at a photo from an animation and using cutouts to translate it into figure photography. This really set me up to do more stuff like this in the future.
You know, I really do think that if RAM prices didn't skyrocket, then the Steam Machine would have released with Half-Life 3 as a launch title, and I'd be playing that instead of making this video.
So as consolation, I'm going to be doing a Half-Life shot next.
I want to do a shot of the HEV suit sitting in a tube in a laboratory like where you first find it in both Half-Life games. It's going to be one of these heavily detailed shots with a bunch of props. I did a lot of these last year, and there's going to be some paper elements in it, but just not a lot. Cutouts aren't going to be as big of a part of this one. I have this bin with a bunch of props in it, including this like computer terminal, just like what you see in the Half-Life games. So I took that cutout and a bunch of other stuff like shelves and computer screens and desks and pallets and all sorts of stuff, including this NECA Gordon Freeman, which I took the head off of to use as the suit. This diorama is from 78 points of articulation. It's been very well loved. As you can see, there's still some red paint on it from October. I have this Hall of Armor display type piece here, which will work as a container for the suit. I started decorating the room. One detail I want to note is the pipe coming out of the tube. You know, the technology in Half-Life is never seamless. Everything always has a bunch of wires and pipes and stuff connecting to it. It wouldn't really make sense for the container to just be sitting there, not hooked up to anything, so I think details like this are pretty important to making the shot feel like Half-Life. And one thing I found is that printed details and artworks really amplify the look of a shot. So for this picture, I got these printed Combine propaganda posters. Also a pretty cool Aperture Science poster with a turret on it. It reminds me of those office sections in the Portal games. I really wanted this shot to feel like a love letter to Half-Life and Valve games in general. If I thought about it at the time, I would have tried to include like a TF2 comic book somewhere in frame here. For a more meta type of reference, I got this cutout of the Half-Life 1 home screen to put on the computer monitor, and then I took it a bit further with some weapons and items from the Half-Life games like the crowbar, the spaz, and the gravity gun. And then after shuffling the room around a bit, I came up with this angle on the setup, getting everything in frame. Up top here, I have these purple LEDs to add a bit of color, and also another white LED to balance it out, that way the top doesn't just become purple. And for the rest of the lighting, I have this LED on the side and my desk lamp, and this is how that turned out. Over in Lightroom, the first thing I knew I wanted to edit is the orange. I wanted that suit to really stand out. Then I made my white balance cooler to contrast with the orange and added some blue color grading and some clarity to bring out some of the sharper details here. I ended up shooting two versions of this shot because while I did want the suit to be the main focus, I also think the crowbar is pretty important, but at the same time, I didn't want to make my f-stop super high to get both in focus. I think F10 is a really good spot. So to edit this, what you want to do is you want to bring both of your layers into Photoshop here, and then make sure they're both selected and rasterize both layers, and then go up to edit and go to auto align layers. And what that's going to do is it's going to match them up perfectly so you can now erase stuff between them and get both things in focus. There's also like a focus stacking tool you can use as well that blends them a bit better, but I mean, sometimes I just prefer the results when you erase it by hand. And I like this one quite a bit. I'm now quite accustomed to doing these type of shots. Honestly, I wish I did this photo back in October. Maybe if he brought back like a suit up type of theme for October, I would have done something like this. I did do a different Half-Life shot last year, which I do still like. I even got to reuse that Black Mesa barrel I made for that photo for this new picture. Oh, I should have put a health pack on the wall again. That was a great idea that I had last year. I should have brought that back as well. But yeah, pretty happy with this one. A lot of fun references and props and stuff. Hopefully we get Half-Life 3 sometime soon. So probably for me, the biggest reason why I think it's going to be worth learning to use cutouts is because sometimes I want to do a shot, but one of the characters in the photo doesn't have a figure. For instance, lately I've been on that JoJo's Part 7 hype, and I wanted to recreate this panel from Steel Ball Run, but they never made a figure of Tusk Act 4. So instead, we're just going to do it with cutouts. I began by masking Tusk out of the original manga panel, and this part of the process is quite tedious, but I think it is important because I get a feel for exactly what I'm going to be cutting out later. Like here, I realized I need to clean up parts of the image in Photoshop first so I wouldn't have these effect lines covering it, and I never would have noticed that if I had just printed out the whole page and cut it out that way. Also, I'm making the decision to not follow the original panel faithfully. In the manga, when Johnny uses Tusk, it shows these golden lines over him to show the golden ratio over his attacks. And I want to try to do a similar thing in this photo, so I also made these golden lines to print out as well. So, with all of my cutouts ready, printed from Staples, 8.5 by 11, super heavyweight paper, it was time to get to work. It took like half an hour, but I did Tusk first, and then I cleaned up the edges with a pen. In the original panel, Johnny has his knee tucked up to his face, and Tusk is sitting on top of him. And now, okay, the figure can't hit this pose. So what I did is I just disconnected Johnny's whole leg and I held it up on a separate stand from the rest of the figure. Then I attached the big cutout of Tusk Tusk on top of that leg, so the whole thing here consists of two parts held up by separate stands and held together by sticky tack. And from the right angle, when you look at it straight on, it looks perfect. That is why I practice these things. If I hadn't done those other cutout shots earlier in the month, I don't think I would have been able to pull this off, at least not as well as I did here. Now, speaking of practice, I need to practice more. I don't know what I was thinking making the lines so thin like this. I broke a bunch of them trying to make it work. Like, what I should have done originally is I should have made them a lot thicker, that way I could just cut them to be thinner when I actually had it printed out. But what I ended up doing here is I just cut them bigger, and then I took the white spot around the edge and I just filled it in with a gold marker, which worked well enough. Okay, so let's get to shooting. I raised everything up, that way I could get my TV in frame, which I need for the background. I ended up making a few of these gold lines, and my method is to use one big one to frame Johnny and Tusk here, and then have two smaller ones dividing up the middle of the picture around the characters. It's not really how these things work in the original manga art, but my intention was to use these lines matching up with the intersections of that grid overlay on the camera. Kind of like they're breaking down the composition, and also highlighting parts of the figures that they're wrapping around. They really bring attention to the Tusk cutout. All in all, while not exactly accurate, it makes the image super eye-grabbing and very, very fun to look at. I love this right here. I think that looks great. On my TV, I pulled up a big image of a galaxy, which I edited in Photoshop to make it pink and purple. Then I set up my lamp and a couple of LEDs, one of which is set up on top of my camera. And the reason why it's like that is because I wanted a notable bright spot on Tusk's shoulder where like the lines are actually shining onto the figure. I think it helps make the cutouts look a lot more convincing when they're affected by light the same way a figure would be, you know? I had to get a couple takes here because I'm going to need to remove those ugly stands in Photoshop in a second, so I got a version without the figures on screen. But first, let's do some colors. So in Lightroom, I raised the contrast, highlights, lowered midtones, messed with white balance a bit. I wanted to have this like golden type of glow. Also wanted the pink in all the details of Tusk to really stand out. Then I cleaned up some things and removed the stands in Photoshop using those extra images without the stands and erasing parts. And here is our final result. And you know, okay, the cutout is not perfect, and I probably could have found a way to do the spin effect on Johnny's finger like in the original panel. Like, this could be a bit better, I think. But you know what? It could always be a bit better. And for a shot like this, I honestly don't care. I think this one rocks. This is my favorite shot in the video. I've always loved Steel Ball Run, and this is one of those shots I've always wanted to recreate, but I wasn't able to until now, and it just worked out so well now that I can do this stuff with cutouts. As long as I have access to a printer, a lot of patience, and I keep practicing it, I can really make whatever I want, okay? This is freedom right here. This is infinite possibilities. So I had this set up on my desk for a while now of Superman just playing with a dog, but I never thought of a way to make it into a complete photo. Superman for all seasons. I like this page a lot where Superman goes to rescue this dog, and it has these lines about, to understand the man in the cape who could fly, all I needed to know was Clark. I wouldn't call it a recreation by any means because I don't have any plans to do this type of storytelling with the people in the back, but I do think there's something kind of powerful about having this god among men holding such a small and delicate creature in his hands and smiling. It's a great shot, especially with that quote. So I put the text on these speech bubbles in Photoshop and printed them out to cut out and use in this photo with that Superman holding the dog pose I had on my desk. I'm just going to combine it and make it into a photo. I got a grass rug, this desk lamp, this other LED, a blue background in the light box. It doesn't get easier than this. The cutouts I'm holding up on Figma stands. I made sure to capture two shots, one with and without the text to make it easier to remove the stand, just like with that Tusk shot a second ago. Also, that fog at the bottom is some fake cobweb, which I put over my lens to give it a softer look. And I also like that the lighter color at the top of the frame matches the bottom of the frame. I think that really completes it. However, then I went to look on my computer and it was out of focus. damn it. So I got my ass back over to my setup and turned everything back on and set it all back up, and I got another 2 shots. I edited them together in Photoshop, removing the stands, and here is what we're looking at. For editing, I wanted like an almost white color here, slightly blue, so I raised exposure and contrast. I gave it a blue hue, some color grading, some warm midtones and highlights, and you know, all of this is done really subtly. I wanted this shot to look simple. I think it puts a good presence on the text, which is what I wanted. Also, I raised my grain a little bit. I think it gives it a good texture. I got that idea from Podcheesy. And yeah, I like it. It's not as ambitious as other shots in this video, but I think it's worth showing because there are some more simple uses for cutouts as well. Not everything needs to be a big setup. It can actually be really simple. I think all you really need sometimes is a light box and a good quote, and it can pack a lot of meaning. Okay, so for another SBR photo, I want to recreate this set of panels where Gyro's like, let's have a toast, and Johnny's like, to what? We've lost everything. It's a great scene, and it's from one of my favorite arcs in Steel Ball Run. I'm planning to remake all 4 panels here on screen, cutouts for the text bubbles, and I'm going to edit them on top, and I'm also going to do the snow tangibly, like how I did this Pokemon shot a couple videos ago. But before all of that, I grabbed one of these green bottles from the Tamashii Goku table set, and I used white electrical tape to add some detailing onto it. Like, this bottle will get a panel all to itself. I want to make sure it's not just a flat green bottle. I dug through some accessories for like an hour before deciding to give Gyro this mug. It's the best I have, though I wish it was silver. And yeah, these two look pretty good together. For the text, I got all 4 speech bubbles printed on paper. The plan is to take a picture of the printed bubbles and edit them onto the page. It's different because I'm not gonna literally have the text next to the figure in the photo, but like, the worry that I have is I would either have to compromise how zoomed in the shots need to be or get the text printed on really small paper. So yeah, I made sure to get some clear pictures of each bit of dialogue. And then once that was done, it was time to actually shoot the figures. So I got Gyro here holding the mug. For Snowfall, I just use baking flour and I drizzle it on top of the figures. The fraction here you see on the camera, that is the speed at which my photo is shot. For instance, 1/20th of a second will have more motion blur than 1/100th of a second. So the method is to shoot a bunch of photos at 1/400th of a second. That way it captures a bunch of instances of that fraction of a second where the snow is coming down in its mid-air. I shot a total of 31 pictures of Gyro with various amounts of snow in front of him, and then I went into Lightroom. I took each shot, I applied these color settings to them. Then, after everything was edited and noise corrected, I took them all into Photoshop and combined them into one image by overlaying them and erasing parts to maximize the amount of snow falling on screen at once. And then I went and did pretty much the same process for Johnny. It kind of ends up looking like a stop motion when I scroll through all the pictures. And I also did the same for their drinks. Then, one more step, I just have to combine everything. So I took the original panel layout and I overlaid it and I remade it in Photoshop. And yeah, this turned out pretty nice. I love this moment in the manga, and it's always cool to shoot anything with rain or snow like this. Now, I do wish 2 things. One, I wish I found a better mug for Gyro. I didn't expect it to blend in with the snow so much. I really wish it was silver or bronze. That would have worked a lot better, I think. And then, you know, I do kind of wish I did a second page here as well. While on its own, this does work fine. Maybe that extra little bit there would really complete it. Regardless, though, I think this turned out really sweet. I hope the me from 5 years ago that was reading Steel Ball Run in school instead of doing my work is proud of me today doing these shots. So earlier in the video, I did those 2 Madoka shots to experiment with using cutouts, right? Now it's time to come back and complete that row with my biggest shot all video. I have this Figma Final Form Madoka. I want to do this shot with the rings and patterns and the backgrounds and everything. I don't want to literally just do a printed background. The star behind her, the bridge, the planet, they need to be 3D. They need to have some depth to them. You know, there's so much cool stuff going on in this image right here. I don't want my shot to look flat at all. all. First, I masked out the bridge of flower petals, easy enough. I also added this pink border to it to make it easier to cut out. I learned from the Tusk shot earlier. Next, for the star in the back, parts of it are cut off, but aside from the center, it should just be symmetrical, so I ended up cutting it in half and mirroring it. Then I masked one of the pink circles and overlaid it on top of the parts that didn't come out very nice when I mirrored it. This was very annoying to cut out. I'm not good with circles yet. The other two elements of the shot I wanted were the planet at the bottom, which I masked out, and that was a pretty easy cutout. And then I wanted one big printed background for the outer rings. I got it made at Staples on 24 by 36 paper. I had to call in earlier to get it ready. One problem I had to solve was the bridge, because it needs to look big but also have depth, like it's flowing out of the star and into the camera. So what I did is I have one big printed bridge on the background, and I also have this smaller cutout of it to put in front and line up with it. It creates an effect where it's both on the background and in the foreground. It's too close and too far away to be in focus. The one on the background makes the bridge look convincingly huge in size, and the smaller cutout in front makes it appear close up in detail. Now to add Madoka. My cutout for the star is way bigger than the one in the background, and I did this for two reasons. First, it's because it's scaled up to match the Figma, so she looks good in front of it. But secondly, it's because this lets me cover that part of the background where the background bridge connects to the star, which helps with that depth effect I was talking about a second ago, where I want the close-up bridge to appear like it's coming at the camera. But then another thing with that is it lets me keep the background zoomed out, so I have all the bigger rings in frame, but the middle star can be scaled up so you can see Madoka herself a bit clearer. That's not how it is in the original, but I think this works better for a figure photo. By the way, later on I will correct it to be more symmetrical as well, just in case that's bothering you. Last thing to do was to add the planet underneath her. I just have it on this Figma stand in the bottom of the frame. It's behind the bridge, but not in front of the star, which helps out a bit with further selling that depth. Cause like, okay, I wanted to use that big printed background, but I worried it would make it look like a flat piece of paper. So all of these other cutouts are really just measures I did to sell that depth and sell the scale of the photo, make it look big and three-dimensional. All lights on deck. There is a lot of paper that needs to look well lit here, especially that background. It's a pretty big area, and it's important that the flower bridge in the back is as well lit as the close-up one, so that way they mesh together a bit better. And here is the shot. This photo was pretty easy. I kinda just built upon everything I learned by doing this all month. I understood how all the mechanics worked, so when I looked at the reference, I was confident I could just do it. These figure photos are just products that I'm designing, and I have to make prototype after prototype to eventually arrive at that final version. So whenever I have an idea that would seem impossible, I just assume I have to think about it more out of the box, and I have to practice more, and I have to design more versions. I don't ever want to stop learning. I want to keep practicing new stuff like this and keep coming up with even bigger ideas with the new stuff that I practice and learn how to do as long as I possibly can. That's why I love this hobby. So now that I've gotten a better grip on taking photos using these paper elements, I wanted to do a shot that would have shapes and colors and logos for the sake of it. Think like Araki JoJo's Bizarre Adventure art books. At the time, SHF Jotaro had just come out, and me and Artistic Toaster decided to collab on a set of photos capturing that style using this figure. My first idea was Star Platinum as a cutout, so I started with that. Honestly, I think having the stand look so different from the figure does work really well for what I was going for with this project. Then I just took a big deep dive into various covers for part 3 featuring Jotaro. Mainly I wanted to grab from these two, Stardust Crusaders Volume 23 and 24. I cropped out the ribbons and hearts from 24, specifically wanted that bizarre adventure text, and then I grabbed some hearts and this belt from Volume 23. And I love how Araki does these repeated patterns in these covers, like there's so many little elements from the character designs spread throughout. Like obviously there's the belt, but also having the heart have that same symbol as Jotaro's hat, I think it just has a lot of style. Like I wanted to use elements like that in my shot. I got everything printed and cut out, then I posed Jotaro looking down like this. I started by attaching the ribbons around Jotaro's back with sticky tack, and then I experimented with hiding Star Platinum behind him. I took it over to my light box, I went with this warm color gradient background. I have 3 LEDs, one right, one left, one under the figure, and a desk lamp up top. I put the other cutouts on stands like this, and the idea is to fill in parts of the composition with these patterns and symbols. The setup had to be very precise, like the placement of everything is important. It can't feel too empty or too busy. Each cutout has its own designated place in the image when you divide it up. However, I ran into a small problem where the bottom left of the shot here was empty, but I used all my cutouts I already had made, so I ended up just grabbing one of the hearts from that first Madoka shot earlier in the video, like way at the start, and I just positioned it in that corner. And here is what I came up with right away. Over in Lightroom, I started cropping the shot down a lot. I also screwed around with colors a bit. You know, I wanted my pinks, my oranges, my purples to all be really vibrant. And yeah, that's the shot. It's honestly so cool how many uses there are for cutouts. Like, this picture is really like a collage of different text and symbols and shapes. It's a very cool style here. I hope to keep experimenting with stuff like this in the future. I think one day I'll do a shot like this for each part of JoJo's. Like, that might make a fun video in the future. Like, do 9 photos, 1 for each part, with they all kind of have this type of style to them. Now, like I said at the start, this is a collab, so let's go check in on Toaster. His reference was this specific artwork of Jotaro on a mountain with star platinum underneath. I love the colors here. He got a cutout of the mountain printed out, as well as that red backdrop, and a very disjointed star platinum. He sent me these behind the scenes photos of the setup, just putting everything together, and this was the final product. And you know, this is just sick. Like, I think there's a really good untapped market there of just recreating different JoJo artworks with the SAS and the SHF figures, just remaking these artworks with paper elements like this. I think this is very cool. Both of us making big progress out here. I love the style in both of our shots, and yeah, this was a great collaborative work overall. Okay, so to end this one off, I have a shot that has absolutely nothing to do with cutouts. I got some inspiration from this gif of a penguin out of its natural habitat, admiring the beautiful sunset. It's a very random thing, but I think it'll make for a good toy photo. So I got this little miniature penguin. I started off with a grassy field. I shuffled things around until eventually deciding on this setup on the left of the screen. The plan is to put the sun on the right. I grabbed a bunch of trees. The idea is to put them in the background so they look like they're far away, which worked out really nicely. I decorated the foreground a little bit with some leaves and bushes and things. I found this sun-setting sky online. I really like how it's mostly gold with just like a hint of blue in there. I wanted to add some birds that were flying because they're in their natural habitat. You know, it makes the penguins stand out even more looking up at them flying. As for lighting, it's mostly beaming in from that right side where the sun is, especially with that big lamp over there. Also, this light on top of the camera is just to light the penguin himself because I didn't want him to just be a silhouette against the sunset. Overall, this came along quite nicely. I think this is very beautiful. Right off the camera, this is looking good, but I have some changes to make. Mainly, I wanted more contrast, lower shadows, brighter highlights, a lot of clarity. Gotta emphasize that sunset. And you know, one mask over the sun just to make it a bit brighter. And yeah, that's the shot. It's kind of a silly idea, but I like this one quite a bit. It's an animal out of its natural habitat, a beautiful sunset, some birds flying, it's a nice looking sky. You know, it's just a good looking photo. I want to get this framed, and I'm gonna give it to my mother. I think this is a good one to close the video off on.
So yeah, we are officially back at it, okay? I got some big stuff planned this summer as far as photos and videos go. For instance, I got one I'm working on right now for May the 4th. It's gonna go up somewhere around the start of May, so stay tuned for that. And I'll see you guys in the next one. We are so back for the summer, I'm telling you.